Well, welcome everyone to another episode of Build America, the podcast that is sharing the very heartbeat of the construction industry. I'm your host, Kerry Smith Buck. And if you're a contractor of any sort who does work or would like to do work for the federal government, particularly the Department of Defense, this episode is totally for you. Here with us today are two cybersecurity experts, Wayne Shaw and Jered Bear, who are here to walk us through the latest cybersecurity standards that now apply to DoD or Department of Defense contractors and specialty subcontractors as well. And as Jered and Wayne will tell us in just a moment, these most recent standards, as I understand it, are to align cybersecurity requirements with the types of sensitive data that contractors handle when they do these DoD and federal government projects. So all that to be said, Jered and Wayne, I'm so glad you're with us on Build America. Welcome.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having us.
My pleasure. Let's start out by asking you a two-pronged question. What types of Department of Defense construction projects demand the utmost cybersecurity, and what types of sensitive information are we talking about protecting? Just to give folks an idea if they're not really in the federal contracting arena.
The type of information that we're trying to protect is what's called CUI and FCI. CUI stands for Controlled Unclassified Information. Even though the information is unclassified, it still needs to be controlled on who sees it, who doesn't, obviously. FCI is federal contract information. So any information that comes from the contract needs to be protected also. The different levels tell you which one of those pieces of information needs to be protected at what level. Like FCI, federal contract information, just think of anything during the contract, anything that comes out in the contract after the contract is FCI. So you need to protect it, and that's protected under level one. There's 3 levels to CMMC. We'll get into that. CUI, Controlled Unclassified Information, will be level 2, but you have to have level 1 with level 2 because obviously anything that's in the contract is also CUI and FCI.
Just let's say we're a Department of Defense contractor, or we are answering a request for a proposal, or we'd like to do work with the federal government, with the DoD. With the type of sensitive information, could it be, let's say it's the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency project in St. Louis that's still going on. Would that be something like specific plans for rooms, or what? Give us like some idea of what kind of stuff. I'm sure there's a lot that needs to be protected.
Yeah, so anything that involves FCI or CUI data, so that could be contract information. CUI data could be blueprints. It could be addresses of the locations you're working at. It's all dependent on the classification marker and where you're working at and who determines what FCI and CUI data. And that can be determined by 2 things, by the contract that the contractors are looking at, or it could be determined by the organization you're working with. So it's all dependent on where you're working at, how you're working it, and what you're exactly doing.
Okay, that makes sense to me. How do these, I'm sure there were requirements in existence before now, but how do these latest requirements differ from those that were previously in existence? What kind of parameters were, or is this something totally new in terms of regulatory stuff?
No. So let's go to the why, and that'll answer your question. The why the DoD is doing this. Obviously, the 60,000-foot view of why is because we're getting our information stolen from us, from our adversaries, and sometimes from our people that we like. Everybody's out there on the internet stealing things. So we got to go all the way back to 2017. And since we're limited on time, I won't get into specific dates. We'll just do the 40,000 foot on the why. In 2017, the DoD came out and said, hey, Defense Industry Base, could you meet the requirements for NIST 800-171, which is National Institute of Standards and Technologies, 800-171 Revision 2. That's all governmental gobbledygook. The defense industry said, sure, we'll do that. As a smart business person, if your competitor is meeting all these requirements and spending all this money and you're not, you have a lower cost of goods than he does. So it was a race, basically a race to the bottom, if you want to put it that way. And so we're still losing information. We lost the F-35, we lost the Patriot drone, the list goes on and on. So finally, the DoD came in and said, okay, we're just going to have to make this a standard, and we're going to have to make sure that everybody does it. Hence, the CMMC was born. But before that, they put in DFAR 7012, which says if you sign this contract, you have to meet these requirements. That is in effect right now, which is basically, yes, you have to meet the 800-170 requirements right now. So then the DoD came in and said, okay, now we're going to put in the CMMC and we're going to send an assessor in on CUI on level 2 that we talked about to make sure that you're doing this. And then they set up the cyber AB and all of that to make sure that they had the assessors and they were trained properly so they could come in and do the assessments. So basically look at it like they turned the IT department into the accounting department, and now you have standards and technology. Just like with the accounting department, you have general accepted accounting principles. So then they said, we're going to give you a 5-year run up. And so in 2019, they started this process. We had CMMC level, CMMC 0.75, then we went to 1, and then we went to version 2, which is where we're at now, which has passed all the regulatory requirements, was inked in the book. I think it's a thick book. But anyway, and the ink dried, so it is regulatory on December the 16th. Now they will start showing up because there's one more regulatory thing that they have to get through. 48, I think, is the name of it. So it will show up on the RFPs. So the RFPs already have the requirement under the DFAR 7012. CMMC just says we're now going to, we're going to send an assessor for level 2. If you are level 1, then you have to self-ascertain. You have to say, yes, I have met all these requirements. And if you lie to them, then the False Claims Act comes in and you really put yourself in a heck of a mess. So there is a level 3, but we're not worried about level 3 because that's Boeing and Northrop Grumman, and where our guys aren't going to talk about that. If anybody listening to this has been told that they need a level 3, they need to call a consultant really quick.
So people are listening. They might be a little nervous if this sounds unfamiliar to them. But if they're listening to this in January, how does that change what and when they need to do things?
Okay, it'll take Jered and I 9 to 12 months to take a company from where they are now to a level 2. That is if they work their buttons off. For level 1, we can get them there in 90 days, depending on how the MSP works in here. We can get them to 90, 120, sometimes 6 months to get them to a level 1. When they're listening to this in January, they're a year and a month behind.
So the thing that listeners need to understand that the CMMC is evolving. So it did evolve at the speed of government, which is really slow. However, the government has their eyes on cybersecurity, and as we continue to evolve and engage in future adversarial conflicts, the cybersecurity of everything, not just for CMMC in the construction industry, is a growing need. And so this will continue to evolve and get more stringent. And that's why it's so important now to really take this seriously.
That makes sense. And I know, Wayne, you said race to the bottom. I was thinking of the costs if a smaller firm, construction firm or sub doesn't have, a whole IT department that's up on all of this, and they're bidding on something that might be hard bid, the cost of even complying who pays for that? Do they pay for it? Does the owner, the federal government, in the price they quote them, or how does that work?
They pay for it. That's the short answer. The long answer is the government is going to assume that it is baked into the price across the board. The government will say, and I'm going to have to agree with them because I'm old and cranky, that they've had 5 years to do this. They should have been doing it since 2017. To say, oh my gosh, I have to burden a $75,000 bill, they could have worked their way up to it. But is it going to be expensive? Yes. Is it going to remove a lot of people from bidding on these? Unfortunately, yes. I've been helping the DIB since 2019 on this, and I have lost 3 mom and pops now that just could not afford it and is walking from doing this business. If we can get them in as a level 1 and we can get everybody to understand what's going on, it's very complicated. You have to put in SPRS scores, and it just goes on and on with government acronyms. If they're confused, they really need to, like the AGCMO, we put on webinars and seminars for people to understand all this. They just need to hop on one of those or get a hold of a consultant and help them understand.
For those of you listening that didn't know that acronym, it's the Associated General Contractors of Missouri, and their website is agcmo.org. I was going to ask Jered that in terms of, and you answered it beautifully already, Wayne, but in terms of the playing field of qualified, say, specialty subcontractors, if it's like a heating, ventilation, and air conditioning contract or a electrical contract, I'm sure the government wants to get the best bang for its buck, but they also want to have the most qualified experts on the job. And I would, do you worry, Jered, that some of this is going to narrow down where it's just the biggest that have an advantage, or maybe not the biggest and the best?
Absolutely. Those who have the budgets, those who have seen the writing on the wall, they're already doing it, or it's already done, so to speak. And so this will, as Wayne said, wean out some of the smaller mom and pops, but even some of the big organizations that Wayne and I have talked to. We've talked to organizations that have kicked the can down the road and they say they're 4 years behind. If that doesn't give up a wake-up call, I don't know what will.
Definitely. Now, when you were talking about the inspections or whatever the term is, when they send people out to see about the compliance, is that sort of akin to an IRS audit? Do they just call you and set a date and then all of a sudden they're there? Or I'm sure the companies don't have enough heads up to really do anything about it if they get the call.
Well, the process is the company says they're ready, then they can go out to the marketplace on the, okay, so let me back up a little bit to what the DoD did. The DoD set up an organization called the Cyber AB at cyberab.org, and they are in charge of training all the assessors, training the consultants, training, and that's what we are. We're one of the consultants. We're what's called RP, registered practitioners, with the Cyber AB. The Cyber AB is a non-for-profit organization that is tasked with training and then making sure that all the assessments that come in from, and they call them, instead of assessors, they call them C3PAOs, that certified third-party organization. Okay.
I thought it was a Star Wars robot
Yeah, really.
until you got done with that acronym. Sorry, go ahead.
It is the DoD.
Yeah. Yep.
So when the organization wants to be certified, so when construction company A wants to be certified and they're at level 2, then they get a hold of a C3PAO company and they negotiate out how much it's going to cost to come and do the assessment. Once that negotiation is done, then they send all of the policies, procedures, all of the evidence, as it's called, up to the assessor. The assessor starts looking at it, and then they'll show up on site and make sure that what they said they were going to do, they're going to protect this data this way. They show up and make sure that they are doing it exactly that way, and they either meet or they don't meet. And then they have POAMs, which is the government's to-do list, right? They have 180 days after the assessment. Any of those POAMs have to be met. And then that assessment goes to the Cyber AB, and the Cyber AB makes sure that the assessment was done correctly. And then they're issued their certification. That is the certification that they put on the RF.
Okay.
Okay. That whole process. So we said it takes 9 to 12 months to get, for Jered and I, to get somebody to a level 2. You're looking at another 3 to 5 months to get through the assessment process, because we're talking hundreds of pages of policies and procedures and documentation and evidence that they have to go through. And so that's level 2. For level 1, you have to have a smaller set of policies, procedures, and you have to have it all written out. And then the president or the owner or whomever signs off on it and says, yes, we have met all of these controls. And now the assessors or the AB has the right to walk in anytime and ask for them. If they don't have them, then you're in violation of the Fair Credit Report Act.
Jered, I wanted to ask you about, as you mentioned, blueprints as an example of sensitive data. As more and more systems within contractors, within companies are automated, say the BIM plans or the things that are digitized, as technology advances, is the company more vulnerable to cyber attacks? The more that isn't just old school CAD drawings or whatever?
If they're not following basic cybersecurity principles, which NIST does a good job laying out in the 171 and 172, they're all vulnerable to cyber attacks. These cyber attacks continue to evolve. I know AI is a buzzword right now, and everybody wants to use it to promote their products, but our adversaries are constantly using AI to develop new attacks. I don't want to scare the listeners, but I think this is very important to say. Every single one of us that's listening to this and across the entire United States, we're fighting an active cyber war, whether we like it or not. You're fighting the cyber war. I'm fighting the cyber war. Wayne's fighting the cyber war. Our children, grandkids, everybody's fighting the cyber war just because that's the nature we live in. We've been doing that for the past 20 years. It's just now we're starting to play catch up with all these compliances that are coming down because we haven't been doing IT and cybersecurity right for over 30 to 40 years now.
Wow, that is sobering. I could talk to you all day, and I hope that people will follow up with you if they have any questions. But we have been visiting today with Wayne Shaw and Jered Bear, who are experts on all the certification that needs to be happening so that companies can respond to requests for proposals and hopefully gain work or additional work with the Department of Defense. But I'm really grateful and I'm in awe of how well you can translate this. I know you can't shorten the acronyms or the numbers, but you did a great job of explaining it. If someone has questions, how best would they get in touch with you both, or what would be a good email website just to follow up?
You can go to 59s, and it's FIVE9, the letter S, consulting.com, 59sconsulting.com. You can also go to the agcmo.org and talk to Amber there. So you can talk to me, you can talk to Amber, you can talk to Jered, you can give us a call. It's on the phone numbers are on our webpage, and you can go out there and get more information about it. Or if they just want to learn, the Cyber AB has a town hall at the last Tuesday of every month. And so if you go to cyberab.org, they're more than welcome to send you the 467 page document that is the CMMC.
Maybe as a PDF, huh?
Yeah. I can tell you, if you have insomnia, it will put you to sleep in a hurry.
That's good to know.
I was just going to add, Kerry, if your listeners are looking to audit their MSP, their managed service providers that provide IT services, they can also reach out to me. I'm with Security Insight, and also we work with Five Nines very closely. So that's securityinsight.co is our website.
Perfect. Securityinsight.co. Awesome. It has been a pleasure to learn from you both again today, Wayne and Jered, and I hope you'll come back on again next time. Will you agree to do that?
Yes,
Absolutely.
you bet.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And thanks for listening, everyone, to this episode of Build America podcast.